The rejection landed like a quiet slap in the middle of a candlelit restaurant, the kind that leaves no mark but burns long after. Hannah sat frozen at a small table near the window, her hands wrapped around a glass of water she had not touched, watching the empty chair across from her as if it had personally betrayed her. The man from the blind date had stood up, mumbled something about a sudden realization, and walked away without looking back. The hum of conversations around her felt cruelly loud, and she wondered how many times a heart could shrink before it simply stopped hoping. What if this were you, dressed carefully, heart exposed, believing just for one evening that something good might finally happen, only to be reminded that you were once again the easy choice to walk away from? Would you stay seated and pretend you were fine, or would you run before anyone noticed the quiet unraveling inside you? Hannah had learned endurance early in life, growing up in Ohio with a mother who prayed every morning and a father who disappeared before she learned how to forgive. She married young, believing love was something you held onto tightly so it would not escape. The marriage lasted 8 years and ended with empty rooms, legal papers, and the slow erosion of her belief that she was chosen by anyone at all. At 36, with no children and a heart worn thin by disappointment, she had reluctantly agreed to the blind date after months of gentle pressure from friends who insisted that hope was not yet expired. Sitting there now, surrounded by couples leaning toward each other with ease, she felt foolish for believing them. She stayed because leaving felt like admitting defeat, and Hannah had survived worse than public rejection. She sat through the rest of the meal she had ordered, barely tasting it, staring at the flicker of the small candle as tears threatened to fall. That was when she noticed a boy across the room laughing softly, his small hands wrapped around a spoon, his eyes bright in a way that suggested safety. Beside him sat a man with tired shoulders and a face marked by gentleness rather than confidence. He wore a worn jacket and watched his son with the kind of devotion that came from knowing love could be taken away without warning. Michael had not planned on being there long. As a widower raising his 8-year-old son alone in Pennsylvania, evenings out were rare and usually rushed. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him to learn grief and parenthood at the same time. He worked construction during the day, packed lunches at night, and prayed silently for strength he never felt he had enough of. He noticed Hannah not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because her sadness mirrored something familiar inside him. It was the look of someone who had shown up hoping and been quietly dismissed. When Michael stood and walked toward her table, Hannah assumed he was going to ask if the seat across from her was free or apologize for his child's noise. She braced herself for polite conversation she did not want. Instead, he stopped in front of her and placed his hands in his pockets, grounding himself, and asked if he could sit for a moment. The request was gentle, not demanding, and something in his eyes made it impossible for her to say no. He sat, not too close, and spoke with honesty rather than charm, explaining that he had seen what happened and that no one deserved to be left like that. He told her he was a single father, that his life was not polished or impressive, and that he believed in God's timing even when it made no sense. What followed was not romance but recognition. Hannah listened as he spoke about loss and the long nights of learning how to be enough for someone who needed him. She found herself speaking too, sharing the small humiliations of dating after divorce, the feeling of being evaluated and discarded. There was no flirting, no performance, just two wounded adults acknowledging each other without shame. Time slipped quietly past them, unnoticed. When Michael asked her to marry him, it was not dramatic or loud. It was raw and imperfect, spoken with trembling sincerity. He said he did not know her favorite color or how she took her coffee, but he knew that the way she listened felt like home. He said he was not offering fireworks but faithfulness, not certainty but commitment. The words stunned Hannah into silence. Every sensible part of her mind screamed that this was impossible, irresponsible, absurd. Yet something deeper, something she had buried under years of disappointment, recognized truth when it stood in front of her. She thought of all the times she had asked God why love seemed to pass her by, why she was always almost chosen but never fully claimed. She looked at Michael's hands, rough from work and steady from responsibility, and imagined a life not built on fantasy but on shared resilience. She imagined mornings that were not lonely and evenings that did not ache. She imagined being needed and needing someone in return. Hannah did not answer immediately. They exchanged numbers instead, parted with a promise to meet again. Weeks turned into months filled with shared meals, church pews, school events, and conversations that peeled away fear layer by layer. She grew to love Michael's son, Joshua, whose laughter softened parts of her heart she thought were permanently closed. Michael learned Hannah's quiet strength, her patience, the way she loved without condition once she felt safe. The proposal came again one winter evening in a small living room lit by a single lamp. This time, it was not shocking but inevitable. Hannah said yes with tears that felt like release rather than sorrow. They married in a modest church surrounded by people who believed in second chances. The blind date became a distant memory, no longer a wound but a doorway. Just before this story ends, take a moment and comment below if you have ever felt overlooked, rejected, or surprised by an unexpected turn that changed your life. Years later, Hannah sometimes thought about that night in the restaurant and how close she came to leaving before hope arrived in an unexpected form. She learned that rejection is not always an ending, but sometimes a redirection toward a love that is deeper and more enduring than what we imagine. If this story stirred something in your heart, gently reminding you that kindness and courage can change everything, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, but only if it truly touched you.